It's the Marketplace Morning Report. We are from APM, American Public Media.
Hey there, I'm Felix Contreras from Alt Latino. Join this station in celebrating Public Radio Music Day on October 23rd. Visit publicradiomusicday.org to learn more.
North Florida TPO, proud sponsor of WJCT's First Coast Connect, bringing to the community innovation in transportation planning, commuter services, clean fuels, and intelligent transportation systems. More at northfloridatpo.com.
Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjacks.com.
This is WJCT News 89.9 Jacksonville. Up next, national and local news from NPR and the WJCT News team.
Good morning, I'm Ann Schindler, and on today's First Coast Connect, what a season of intense storms has taught us about our ability to withstand the weather. We ask the city's chief resilience officer about progress and pitfalls when responding to climate change. Later, we look at the social pressures impacting high school dropout rates, as well as strategies to keep students engaged and attending class. And the city's monorail system is transformed into a nightclub on the move. We tell you how to catch a ride on the Skyway Social. Join the conversation. Give us a call at 904-549-2937 or email firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. It's all ahead this hour after the day's news.
I'm from NPR News in Washington. I'm Corva Coleman. For the first time, the U.S. has confirmed North Korea has sent troops to fight with Russia against Ukraine. NPR's Anthony Kuhn reports from Seoul. North Korean forces have not played a major role in any conflict since the Korean War.
Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin told reporters that there is now evidence that North Korea has sent troops to Russia. He added that if they join the fight in Ukraine, it'll be a very serious matter which could have an impact on both Europe and Asia. Meanwhile, South Korea's National Intelligence Service Chief Cho Tae-yong told lawmakers that 3,000 North Korean troops are already receiving training in Russia, with plans for 10,000 to be deployed by December. He says none have taken part in combat yet, nor has North Korea told its own people about the deployment. Publicly, both Pyongyang and Moscow deny allegations about the deployment, calling it a hoax and smear tactic. Anthony Kuhn, NPR News, Seoul.
President Biden called for former President Donald Trump to be locked up at a campaign event yesterday for Vice President Harris, before quickly adding he meant that politically. NPR's Tamara Keith reports the Trump campaign has seized on Biden's comment.
President Biden was speaking at a Harris campaign office, raising alarms about the dangers of a second Trump term, from his plans to politicize the civil service to Trump's talk of retribution.
I know this sounds bizarre. It sounds like if I said this 5 years ago, you'd lock me up. We got to lock him up. Political lock him up. Lock him out. That's what we have to do.
Trump's campaign immediately declared this was proof that the ongoing prosecutions of Trump are political persecutions. In 2016, Trump encouraged his supporters' chants of lock her up. Tamara Keith, NPR News.
Struggling aircraft maker Boeing says it has lost more than $6 billion in the third quarter. Boeing has significant challenges, including strict oversight by regulators after a door panel blew off on one of its jets earlier this year. It's also facing a crippling 5-week strike by unionized machinists that's halted production of Boeing's top-selling aircraft. The machinists are voting today on Boeing's latest contract offer. NPR's Joel Rose reports that voting results are expected tonight.
The machinists' union overwhelmingly rejected Boeing's first contract offer in September. Now there's a better one on the table for the more than 30,000 union members. The company is offering a 35% wage hike, up from 25% in its initial offer, though still short of the 40% raise the union wanted. The company would also increase its contributions to employees' 401ks. But Boeing has not agreed to one key union demand, restoring the pension plan workers lost a decade ago. Joel Rose, NPR News.
You're listening to NPR News.
And this is WJCT News 89.9 in Jacksonville. Good morning. I'm Stephen Ponson. It's 9:04. Jacksonville's recreational department is asking residents for their virtual input on its parks. The city is updating its parks master plan and wants residents to use its Jacksonville Parks Pinpoint app to help shape the future. You can go to jacksonville.gov/welcome, then search for the Jacksonville Parks Pinpoint app, then type in any address or park name to zoom into that area. Users can select a category to comment on, locate amenities difficult to access, or identify areas where improvements are needed, such as walking or bicycles. People can even propose a new park location. City officials say the online insights will help enhance resiliency, promote equality, and improve the quality of our parks for everyone. The city of St. Augustine is holding a public meeting tonight that will focus on flood mitigation efforts. It's hosted by the city and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Attendees will get an opportunity to learn about plans to prevent coastal and inland flooding. The meeting starts at 6 tonight in City Hall downtown. If you're unable to attend in person, the meeting will be streamed live on the city's website, citystaug.com. Some patchy fog should be burning off this hour in northeast Florida. Once we get to the afternoon, we'll have mostly sunny skies with highs in the low 80s, breezy conditions as well. Mostly clear overnight with lows in the low 60s. Patchy fog again tomorrow, highs tomorrow in the mid-80s.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Sony Pictures, presenting the new movie Here, reuniting the director, writer, and stars of Forrest Gump, a tale of love, loss, laughter, and life. Here is only in theaters on Friday, November 1st.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided in part by Baptist Health and North Florida TPO.
Good morning. I'm Ann Schindler, and this is First Coast Connect. Today, once derided for being late to the game on climate change, the city of Jacksonville is now being recognized nationally for its resiliency planning. We get an update on how that effort is going ahead of a community conversation on preparing for climate change. Later, how anti-bullying programs are being used to reduce student dropout rates. But first, regional resilience is the focus of an event this Tuesday examining local preparations for the impacts of climate change. Here to discuss it is panelist Ann Coglianese, Chief Resilience Officer for the City of Jacksonville. Good morning, Ann.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. Also, Jessica Palombo, editor of Jacksonville Today and moderator of ADAPT, Regional Resilience in Action. Good morning, Jessica.
Good morning.
Thanks for being here. So, Ann, this is just a happenstance of timing, but just a short while ago, the city of Jacksonville announced a really prestigious national recognition for the city. Tell us about it.
Yeah, the city of Jacksonville is receiving a National Planning Award from the American Planning Association for its Resilient Jacksonville strategy, which came out 1 year ago. And we're really pleased to be recognized. We were so proud of the work that was done for that strategy to come together, and we really believe in the impact it'll have. But to have our national peers also hold it up as an example of really excellent resilience planning is it's a special day for us.
Yeah, I alluded to it in the beginning, but there was a time when everybody said, "Oh, Jacksonville is behind the eight ball. It hasn't started this process. It hasn't done enough to prepare. Every other city is way ahead." And then, that perception is changing. The reality has changed.
Yeah, absolutely. When I first started, that was what I heard a lot too, is that people were discouraged by how far behind they felt we were. And I kept trying to reassure people the goal is really not for us to catch up to where everyone else is. We really want to look at Jacksonville in a creative and unique way and try to get to the front of the pack on this issue and really set Jacksonville up to be a national leader on resilience. I believe we're doing that just in the first year of this program. We're taking really incredible strides to use some of the best science and data in our decision making. That was true of our planning work, but now as we're moving into getting kind of projects on the ground, how can we look at flooding in new ways and also just continuing to push the limits on the types of policies, land use, and other places where we can really step out and put some creative solutions to the test.
I'm curious if you think that, planning for trying to play a catch-up game with climate change perhaps leads to some maybe short-sighted or short-term solutions in a way that a more holistic, long-term, and taking the time to make the plan perhaps is a little bit more sustainable.
Yeah, we feel that, sound science needed to be the foundation for our planning work, and we're carrying that forward now as we're implementing it. And I think having this plan in place is allowing us to set Jacksonville up for more long-term strategic decisions. So having this compound flood model that we're building will allow us to make really informed infrastructure decisions, not just thinking about one threat of flooding from maybe sea level rise or storm surge, but seeing that as connected to inland rainfall flooding. That'll allow us to make sure that when we're putting new infrastructure on the street, we're thinking about the elevation it needs to be built out, the materials we're using to build it, and the place that we're putting that infrastructure to ensure that that public benefit is actually reaped and that infrastructure can actually achieve kind of its full useful life.
Yeah, and Jessica Palombo, so this is the kind of thing that you're going to be discussing and addressing at the ADAPT forum next Tuesday. But you have, Anne and a number of other people that are doing this kind of work. Is that right?
Yes. So last year, actually, I think it was right after the resilience plan was published, we had a very similar event that focused on the city of Jacksonville. Anne was there, our mayor was there as well, and others who all had different perspectives. And this time, we're bringing Anne back, but also expanding out to the region. So the title of this event is Regional Resilience in Action. So in addition to Anne, we will also hear from Elizabeth Payne, who's the CEO of Northeast Florida Regional Council, about the regional resilience planning effort that's underway. We'll hear from Jessica Beach, who is the Chief Resilience Officer in the city of St. Augustine, about their efforts that are ongoing, including a federal study about flooding in their Back Bay area. And Ashante Green, who's the sustainability manager with the city of Jacksonville, she'll give us an update on the regional climate action plan that's being developed by Clean Air Northeast Florida. So that relates specifically to air pollution.
And that's a regional effort that Jacksonville is also a part of, right? That's sort of a...
Yes, and is leading that. So our partner on this event is the city of Jacksonville Environmental Protection Board, who's helping us plan this event. And with ADAPT and the city of Jacksonville, what we're trying to do is bring people in to have a conversation about something that's really easy to dismiss as just too big of a problem for me to personally get involved with, right? Like, I think it's kind of appropriate that our event is next week, a couple days before Halloween, because this is a scary thing to a lot of people. And I understand that, just thinking, too big, not going to think about it. I have to just make lunch right now, right? So what we're trying to do with ADAPT in general is bring it down to a level where you see what is happening on the local level, what efforts are currently undergoing at the city level, at the regional level. And the great thing about all of these efforts is that there are opportunities for people to still get involved, give input, and feel like they're part of the process.
Yeah. And tracking some of those things that Jessica was mentioning in terms of the projects that have begun and are underway is, you're at the year mark. And so that's kind of an update for the community in terms of these are the goals and this is kind of where we're at on a lot of very specific items.
Yeah, and in addition to, being able to announce that we're receiving this award from the American Planning Association, we're also really proud today to announce kind of a 1-year annual update of the resilience strategy. You can find that on our website, jacksonville.gov/resilience. And what residents can find if they look up that report is that we're moving very quickly into implementing this plan. Of the 45 actions that are outlined in the strategy, 38 are currently underway in the city. So we are really trying to break that narrative that plans are something that sits on shelves. This is a very dynamic plan. This strategy is being implemented in real time. We're working with all city departments on that. But the other thing that you'll find in this annual report is some profiles of some key projects that we are working on and that have really been a focal point for the city of Jacksonville this year. One I already mentioned is our cutting edge compound flood model. We're also undertaking the first urban forestry management plan for the city of Jacksonville and working with staff in Public Works Department, Parks Department, the Tree Commission, and we'll want a lot of members of the public to engage on this. And I know from being on your program that you have listeners who are really passionate about trees, so we hope they'll get involved. We've also talked a lot about our heat efforts in that document. So Jacksonville is really trying to be on the cutting edge of how we respond to heat. And I think to Jessica's point about this being a scary topic, I think one of my hopes for next week's event is that residents can really walk away from that, looking at a panel of professionals who are working on this day in and day out. And I hope people walk away feeling very confident that people in key decision-making roles are thinking holistically about climate change, both our contribution to it and the impacts of it locally. And hopefully that can calm some of those fears.
Yeah. Well, if you're just joining us, we are talking with Ann Coglianese. She's the Chief Resilience Officer for the City of Jacksonville, and Jessica Palombo, editor of Jacksonville Today and host of next week's Adapt event. If you would like to join the conversation, you can call us at 904-549-2937. You can email firstcoastconnect@wjct.org, or you can reach out and tag us on social. We have a call from JD in Sea Island. Good morning, JD. Go ahead.
Good morning. My question is for Ann. How are you doing, Ann? It's been a while since we spoke. I think you're doing a good job. My question is, why aren't we looking at more distributed generation? If we're going to be sustainable, the whole idea of generating electricity 200 miles away from the end user, pushing it down the wires to get it to us, when the hurricane and tornadoes just keep tearing them all down, but then the utility monopolies just put it right back up there instead of putting them in the ground, sort of turning some of that down. But the point being is, why aren't we looking at more and more distributed generation, especially with all of these giant warehouses that are going up all over this county?
Thanks, JD. Appreciate it. Ann.
I think one of the pieces of the resilience strategy that was a little bit unconventional was really, we didn't focus on the sustainability or the energy. This was how climate change was going to affect residents, but we did want to leave the door open for that work. And so we did include an action on developing a greenhouse gas inventory and really having the city take steps to develop a full climate action plan. And that is the work that Ashante Green is now leading for the city of Jacksonville. And there are, really sustained efforts to look at how we can put solar and other renewables throughout our community and starting to diversify the types of energy resources that folks can do. Now, for my perspective on community resilience, one of the things that I think is such a benefit is not only is solar clean energy, but also it's something that can cool our neighborhood. So if you put solar on a rooftop, that building is more energy efficient, but also the heat that might have been absorbed by that concrete structure is now getting reflected back up into the atmosphere, and it cools the neighborhood. So we're looking at a lot of ways we can keep our neighborhoods cool, and certainly that's an overlap with our sustainability work and with the energy sector.
But I wonder, to JD's point, if, planning resiliency puts the city somewhat in the position that Jessica was suggesting individuals are in, which is a sense that, what can I do in terms of impacting the problem as opposed to preparing for its impacts, right? And the city's obviously has to plan for this future that's upon us. But there aren't that many things in the works that address the root causes of what's happening to the planet.
Well, so that is the work that Ashante is doing, and we're really happy to have her now because it's very important at the local level that we are prepared for those impacts, and I've been very pleased with the resilience program and how we've been able to set that up, and I feel very confident that we'll put in place measures to protect residents from the worst impacts of climate. But you're right, we are participants in a global economy and a global community. And so we have a role as the city of Jacksonville to do everything we can to lower our contribution to the progression of climate change. And so Ashante is really looking at a whole host of solutions. And the city of Jacksonville has participated in the EPA's Climate Pollution Reduction Grant. And that's the program that's allowing not just the city of Jacksonville, but Jacksonville leading the entire Northeast Florida region to evaluate what is our contribution to climate change and what are the most effective and efficient ways to cut our contributions of greenhouse gas emissions and in general provide kind of a more clean economy.
And those conversations, I guess, must include JEA, right? I mean, that's the city utility and
Absolutely. Yep.
obviously a big producer of, greenhouse gases generally.
Absolutely.
Are those conversations geared towards, fundamental changes? I think that there's always like so many cost concerns that come with, changing the kind of fuel that we use or the kind of electric generation that we produce. And there's a profit issue there too, right? I mean, the city gets money from JEA each year, a good chunk of money. Um, so, if they change their revenue structure, it in some ways also hurts the city.
Yeah, and I think these are the types of questions that'll be really exciting to have Ashante weigh in on at next week's event. But the city works very closely with JEA, and I think the funding piece is one where there's a lot of federal money out there right now to support this work, and so one of Mayor Deacon's priorities has been trying to capture as much federal resources as possible. And so my office certainly does that, but we also work with our colleagues over in the sustainability office to help bring down some of that federal dollars as well.
So I want to ask you about this planning recognition. What do you think, in particular, it stands out to the Planning Association that they chose Jacksonville for this? What are they seeing in the work that you've done?
I think two of the kind of standout pieces of our strategy, the first is that it was really science-based and data informed. And we felt like that was a really important foundation of information to have before deciding what we need to do. We really need to understand the problem. Where is our heat footprint? Where is our flood profile? How are these things layering with other factors? So if you are already living in poverty, then suddenly an impact of a hurricane is going to be felt more acutely. So we really pulled Census Bureau data and we layered that in with the physical threats. We looked at our roadway networks because even if your home isn't flooded, if the road you take to work or to get your child to and from school is disrupted by a flooding event, you've experienced a flood disruption. So we really looked at use science and data to help us map out a lot of different ways that climate would impact our community and who would be the most vulnerable. And I think that was a very time-consuming but essential part of our planning work. And then I think the second piece that really stood out, from our strategy was the fact that we tried to break down the city into more manageable and consistent development types so that we could talk about how climate impacts would be felt in downtown versus in a suburban area, let's say near town center, versus a rural area on the west side, versus an impaired water body on the north side, right? There's differences in the ways the city has been built out, and then there's different impacts that those communities will feel. And I think what we wanted to do by kind of breaking down the city into consistent development types is then that allows us to tailor solutions and then start to copy and paste those to the other communities that might have some of the similar characteristics. So a more efficient and effective way to cluster solutions and get them deployed rapidly.
And you mentioned earlier the compound flooding model that you've worked with. Not everybody, I think, understands the components for compound flooding, but it is really interesting. So kind of update us on what that tells us about different parts of town.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think from where I sit, I care the most about knowing where flooding is going to occur, that you'll see it, that you'll feel it, that it might cause an issue. But in a city as complex as Jacksonville, we have an ocean system meeting a major river system. We have close to 60 tributaries that branch off the St. Johns River and really wind their way back into communities. And then we are experiencing really heavy rainfall events. And the fact of the matter is, flooding could occur from one or more sources. And really what we're interested is when two sources of flooding overlap. So it's very, very challenging to model and very technical, but I actually think it's very simple for an individual to understand because it matters if a hurricane is hitting at low tide or high tide. It matters if it's rained for a week in Central Florida and the river is at its highest point before we get a king tide or a major wind event that might push water into our river system. And so we now have a model that allows us to see the interplays of those different types of water systems, and that allows us to know better where residents are going to see flooding on the ground.
And so we just had like a real-time example of that with this massive weather event we had a few weeks back where we had tons of rain, and then we were impacted by a hurricane. Milton, what did the modeling tell you that maybe you wouldn't have otherwise known? Did it help the city in any way prepare or respond? Was that an example of compound flooding?
Great question. So we are about halfway through this modeling effort. So we had both the compound flood model up and running and a real-time forecast system up and running, both in a beta version. So we're still fine-tuning. So it's something that we were looking at during those storms, but not using as the foundation for our decision making yet. We really want to make sure we have the best data before we put it into action. But one of the things that was really exciting as we saw those events, I mean, certainly we had heavy rainfall, a little over a month ago that we saw really substantial flooding in streets. And I mean, I got, calls and questions from friends and colleagues saying, we've seen less flooding from a hurricane than we're seeing from just this seemingly random rainstorm for a handful of days. And that was actually one of the reasons that I felt it was so important to build this compound flood model in the first place, is recognizing that heavy rainfall can be a huge disruption and it can cause damage. And so from the places we saw flooding a few weeks ago, we did see those reflected in the areas that our model showed would be vulnerable for specifically rainfall flooding. And then during the two hurricanes, we were able to track kind of in real time what that flood depth and extent might look like, and it did closely match. I'll also say that at this kind of halfway point in developing the model, we've also been able to run some historic storms, including Irma, and our model is showing incredible accuracy in what was reported real time during Irma. So not only have we seen kind of consistent outputs during Helene and Milton this year, but during our storm of record Irma, we're also able to see that this model is very accurate.
I would guess that an event like the recent one actually in some ways is helpful because it adds to the data that you have.
Absolutely. And I also think it really prompted a good community conversation about flooding and the fact that people want to know that their infrastructure will perform regardless of the type of flood exposure we've had. And we just haven't had data at our fingertips to help us anticipate where that rainfall induced flooding. We have to kind of wait until it happens and then say, oh, well, we had some flooding in this intersection. What should we do? We're starting to get to the point where we'll be able to predict where the next low-lying spot that might experience chronic flooding will be, and hopefully that can allow our capital planning to get ahead of it.
Yeah, that's an interesting forecast. We have an email from Mark. He said, wondering how increasing the volume of water in the St. Johns River through dredging helps resiliency. Also, how is JEA's war on residential rooftop solar helping decrease climate changing gases? Take those, I think, one by one. But I mean, we do know that the river was dredged, by the port about 11 miles inland to a depth of about 50 feet. What impacts are you seeing on resilience because of that change in the river?
So it's one of the questions we've asked our modeling team to look at is kind of how does flooding change depending on different depths. And I think one of the biggest changes is in how far inland we're seeing salinity change and how far inland surge is coming. But we're also able, now that we have this model, to kind of toggle different depths. And so we'll be able to also, I think, if at any point in the future that question arises, we'll be able to know what the true impacts are in the moment as we're making decisions about balancing the economic needs of our port with, the environmental and resilience needs of our community. And I think that's going to be a really important piece of science for us to have at our fingertips.
And this might be something else that you'll be discussing on Tuesday, but in terms of rooftop solar, I mean, there has been a sort of concerted effort by existing electric companies or monopolies to, push back and put restrictions on that or make it less useful or beneficial or, accessible to individuals.
Yeah, I think we really want to see an increase in the places where we see small applications of solar. And I think, we see more, as I mentioned earlier, we see more benefits to solar than just the, renewable energy that they're able to produce. There are so many other co-benefits that can come from having a solar roof, especially that heat reduction. And so it's something that we'll be working on quite diligently with JEA and really working to see how we can deploy solar more broadly in our community.
Yeah. And Jessica, I wonder, I mean, ADAPT has been around for a few years now. I'm curious how it's changed in that time, its goal and kind of what you're seeing, and also if these conversations that you have, these community conversations, are getting more sophisticated, just in terms of, people understanding the science, familiarizing themselves with stuff like Anne produces.
Well, we certainly have a very engaged audience. That's something we've noticed right from the start. It's something that, might not be the broadest audience, but the audience that we do have for ADAPT is very interested in these issues. We've done reporting under the banner of ADAPT. We have a podcast that included Anne, I believe, and we also now are really focused on these live events where we are bringing people into our studio here at WJCT to have that face-to-face interaction with the people who are making the decisions, who are working on this, thinking about it every single day.
Yeah. We had a question from Pam on Facebook. She's wondering if the event will be offered virtually.
So the event will not be live streamed virtually, but it will be recorded and posted after the event. So we encourage, if you can't attend, you can still participate by sending us questions ahead of time. Just email me, jessica@jaxtoday.org. That's JAX today.org, and put ADAPT in the subject line and send us your questions. We might be able to incorporate those into the program, and then we'll be posting the recording afterward.
This is a free event?
It is free. So you just need to register at wjct.org/events. And the name of the event, again, is Regional Resilience in Action. Reserve your seat now.
Yeah. And I just want to kind of close talking about some of the intense storms that we've seen up in the Asheville area, where they've seen these terrible floods really destroying their water system, but also their backup water system. That's a place that's done some resiliency planning, envisioning 100-year, 200-year, 300-year storms. This was like a 1,000-year storm, and it doesn't seem that anything anybody is doing from a resiliency standpoint can really prepare for that.
Well, I think that is one of first of all, that was just an absolute tragedy, and those communities are they have a long road of recovery ahead. And I know that our emergency preparedness division has actually sent some of our staff up there to assist. So Jacksonville, I think feels a sense of responsibility to help when these things happen, because people will help us, if and when we experience big major events as well. And so, but I think the difference is that type of flash flooding is almost impossible to predict. I mean, we can see rainfall, but how that's going to, accelerate into flash flooding is a big question mark. And I do feel very fortunate that here in Jacksonville, the types of flood threats that we're facing, we do now have the ability to anticipate those through our compound flood model. And so one of the tasks that team is doing is really looking at a broad range of scenarios, from ones that are really likely to occur to some of those truly 1 in 1,000 year type events. And so we're running 10,000 different scenarios through our model, so that we'll not only know where might it flood, but how likely is it to flood and how frequent might that be. And so that'll really change the way that we're able to prepare our communities, the assets that they rely on. To your point in your question, water supply will be able to share this data with our partners at JEA and GTA and other independent authorities that offer services that our residents rely on. But we'll be all working from a foundation of data that's much more aligned with the full range of what could be experienced here.
I want to take just one final call from Mike. Good morning, Mike. Go ahead.
Good morning. I'll be really quick. I have solar, and several of my neighbors have inquired about it and wanted to get solar. But the biggest barrier is last month I produced 1.3 megawatts and I used 1 megawatt of energy, but I still paid over $100 to JEA. And the reason for that is their quote unquote net metering pays me a third of what they charge me for electricity. So that's what's keeping, my neighbors are relatively wealthy and they would do it, but it just doesn't make sense. And if they would just do true net metering, I think that you'd get widespread adoption pretty quickly.
Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, I mean, I think those are really valid points. And I think in general, if we're going to be moving forward on climate, whether it's solar or whether it's any of these other options of how we build in a smart, clean, and resilient way, making sure that that's balanced with, livability and for the development community profitability. If we need more housing, that's going to have to, be profitable for the development community while toggling, better design and better infrastructure. So I think those are really valid points to raise, Mike, and certainly something that are coming up in conversations that the city is having with JEA, and we share those concerns.
Yeah, I would be remiss if I didn't bring up the topic that I kind of nerd out on, which is like future land development, how we're, maybe dissuading people from building in like the Timucuan swamps and,
Yeah.
which is happening. How we get development to shift away from these very vulnerable places that we know are going to flood within the life of a mortgage. And also whether the conversation about incorporating solar on those future projects is something that you are broaching or trying to incorporate in as you're planning.
Yeah, absolutely. So the city has been working with an advisory committee made up of representatives from the development community, the private engineering communities, affordable housing advocates, environmental advocates, and they've all been around the table since about January, working with city staff and a team of consultant partners to reevaluate our land development regulations and really think about how do we make it attractive for people to build and live in areas of the city that we can feel more confident are lower risk of flooding. And so we've been able to take early outputs from our compound flood model and look kind of at the inverse of that. What areas are consistently not showing up in our modeling as at risk of flooding? And we've been able to delineate some areas of the city where we feel confident that they're high and they're dry and that they're well connected to existing infrastructure like transportation. And that's where we're hoping to really be able to provide some incentives for development to occur there.
Yeah.
When you say incentives, that this topic of conversation came up last year during our resilience event, and we had a representative of the development community there, and she talked about their preference or their belief that incentives were the way to get people to do things, not punishment. So giving incentives for developing in the areas that are more favorable.
Or developing in a smarter fashion and a more resilient homes. And
Yeah. And I mean, obviously, the city doesn't have, large amounts of cash to give out as cash incentives, but we are trying to get creative in thinking about if there are areas of the city that we're confident aren't going to experience flood risks and are near things like bus rapid transit corridors or near our Emerald Trail segments. Are those places where higher density development would be really effective? Looking at some of our blighted commercial corridors. So, if you think Phillips Highway or along Atlantic Boulevard, are those areas where actually it's well suited for more density to be occurring? And so is that something that the city can offer as an in-kind incentive, allowing more density in areas that we feel are really prepared for that type of density and where we want that to occur in a safe way?
well, it's a big conversation. It'll be next Tuesday at WJCT Studios. It's October 29th. It's from 6 to 7. And you can sign up for tickets in advance. They're free.
Right now at wjct.org/events. Get your tickets.
Well, Jessica Palombo and Coglianese, thank you so much for being on today. Appreciate it. And work on your Oscar speech. Huh?
Thank you so much.
All right. Coming up next, we're looking at welcome back. Bullying raises school absentee rates, decreases students' performance, and ultimately can lead kids to drop out altogether. For that reason, preventing bullying is a key focus of Communities in Schools Jacksonville. October is Bullying Prevention Month nationally, and I'm joined now by the group's CEO, Leon Baxton. Good morning, Leon.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much for being here. I want to ask you about bullying. How has how we think about bullying changed in recent years?
Well, part of it is, well, first of all, Communities in Schools, we focus on literacy after school and case management and working with the individual students and families. And what I've seen recently with bullying, a lot of it deals with social media. A lot of it, when we're in the schools, we see that the families are stressed, may have been evicted or whatever. Students are teasing them. So you have all kind of challenges that our students are facing on top of social media and those kind of things.
Yeah. And so I guess research has shown that that really can have an impact on obviously, a child's willingness or interest in attending school if that's where this is happening,
Oh
and
my,
it can
yes.
cause some serious academic decline.
Oh my God, especially with attendance. Attendance has been a buzzword. And one of the things that CIS has been able to do is really take a deep dive into the root cause of why students are missing school. It's family, it's bullying, it's all kind of things. There were 15,000 evictions last year. And when that happens
In this
in Jacksonville alone, and a lot of the families we work with were evicted and doubled up. And so now you couple that with the bullying and the social media, it becomes a challenge for us to really work with those students. But we've been able to provide full-time case managers to work with these students individually and their families to eliminate a lot of those challenges, whether it's homelessness, hunger, bullying in the schools. And what's unique about communities and schools, all of our staff are embedded in the schools all day, every day, and during crisis. So part of the crisis is bullying. Part of it is homelessness, hunger, and getting students and families stable.
Yeah. You talk about some of the challenges, and those are some challenges that you know personally. I mean, in terms of your own
Yes.
childhood, you had some very difficult times. Tell
Yes.
us a little bit about yourself.
Well, growing up at 10, I lost my mother to a heroin overdose and was placed in custody with my grandmother, who died 2 years later. I was on welfare. I understood what it was like to be hungry, living in hotels, all of those things. And 2 years later, I lost another uncle, another 2 years, another uncle, and my father drank himself to death. But it was an after-school program with a lady named Claudine Howard who gave me my first summer job. And I said, well, what do you do? She said, I do social work. So I finished high school and went on to Kennedy High School and then went on to City College and got my degree in social work. And I said,
This was in New York.
yes, in New York City, City College in New York. And I said to myself, I'm going to do whatever I can to prevent kids from going through what I've been through. And I've been with communities and schools 33 of its 34 years.
Wow. Are you ever still in touch with Claudine Howard?
Yes, I spoke with her about a few years ago, but it's been a hit and miss. But I've always told her story, and I started out with communities and schools as one of these case managers and doing the work that they do. So having that caring adult on the campus every day, building relationships with those students, and I must say the families, because the families get bullied too. Okay. We don't think about it. What about social media with parents? So making sure that we're letting the parents know that we're there to help them as well.
So, practically speaking, how does communities and schools work? Are these volunteers? Where are they embedded in the school? How do they connect with students?
Well, we're all of them are embedded in the schools, and many of the students are referred to CIS services by the principal. It could be the administrator, the teacher, or other parents, or other students come and ask for our services. And we focus on three areas, as I mentioned: literacy, where we provide full-time tutors working with the students who are reading below grade level, which become part of bullying because if you're not reading in the classroom at a level, you get teased. After school,
Or if you get held back.
exactly, exactly. Then we have after school, which is funded by Kids Hope Alliance, where the kids have additional academic assistance, enrichment, and dinner. And like I mentioned earlier, our wraparound case management services and workforce development is what really focuses on the families. The other thing I wanted to quickly mention is when it comes to workforce development and preventing dropouts, every one of the CIS seniors who graduates from high school has a written resume, have gone through mock interviews, okay, and have done some research on college and career preparation. And the goal is to be able to provide them with multiple pathways. Not every student may want to go to college, not or military, or they may go into a vocation. And we pay these high school students a stipend for being in our after school program. And the goal is, again, so they don't, bullying means that you can be teased because of what you wear. You don't have the proper clothes. So our goal is to try to provide this holistic approach to the students and their families.
How recent is the understanding that families and providing services for students' families play an important role in the lives of students and their ability to stay in school?
Oh my God, it's very important. Years ago we focused so much on the student, but after COVID, we realized we have to focus on the entire family because the mother is stressed too. The moms are working 2 or 3 jobs or guardians and doing the best that they can. And so by making sure that we help those families, the entire family, not just the student, it makes it easier. Now the student can feel more comfortable coming to school, missing less days because we've connected them with many resources.
So, how is Jacksonville doing? How is Duval County doing in terms of its dropout rate relative to other parts of the state or just relative to its own history?
I think we're doing great. The overall graduation rate in Duval has continued to increase. 96% of our seniors have graduated on time with communities and schools. I got to say that Jacksonville, I am so proud of this city and the funders, whether it's Duval County Public Schools, Kids Hope Alliance, United Way, have all come together. And I must mention this, when COVID happened, none of our funders backed down. They continued to keep us funded and allowed us to continue the services.
And so, how does communities and schools select a school as a place where it will embed?
Very good question. We normally go to Duval County Public Schools and say, where is your greatest need? Where do you think we should put these staff, these embedded case managers or these tutors? So we work in partnership with the district in selecting the schools.
And so the school chooses to participate as much as you kind of
Yes.
select the school.
Yes, and we also get input from the principals because if the principals are not supportive, then we won't go to that school. But I can tell you, every one of our principals in Duval County Public Schools have been embraced us. Like I said, we've been in existence for 34 years. We're getting ready to celebrate 35 years of service in Duval County Public Schools. But it's the principals and the teachers and administrators who we provide that support to as an addition to working with those non-academic issues.
Literacy is still a problem, a big problem nationally, but certainly here in Duval County.
Yes, it is. And one of the things, as I mentioned, one of our initiatives is literacy. We have 30 full-time and part-time AmeriCorps tutors who are trained by Duval County Public Schools and the University of Florida Literacy Institute in a curriculum called the UFly. So everything that we do with literacy is in line with the district. And these tutors are placed in the classroom assisting those teachers and working with those students who are identified below reading level. And again, it comes to bullying. It still ties back. If they're not reading at levels, it's teasing them. But the results are good. We also partner with the mayor's River City Readers, which is exciting with books. We also partner with a library. And we very serious about working with the parents when it comes to reading and encouraging them. So we have all kind of incentives in place that surround literacy and attendance because they all match up with the entire family.
Yeah. Are there opportunities for people who want to volunteer or to participate on some level?
Great question. Yes, it is. We love to have speakers. We have reading days where people can sign up to read to students. We have where we want businesses to set up a time where we can bring some of our high school students out to see the various opportunities to work with them. Speaking, volunteering, mentoring, all of those things are important that volunteers can do. And they can go to the CIS website at cisjax.org.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, your own story stands as a great example of resiliency and kind of being able to endure and achieve great success. Are there experiences that you've had or any stories that stand out to you in your time leading communities and schools?
Well, it's great. Being there so long, has really been helpful. So I'm able to see some of the fruits of the labor. And I've had several of the students that we work with over the 34 years are working for us with communities and schools. They have their children in our after school program. I was just at a restaurant the other day and out comes the owner and he goes, I know you. You're Mr. Baxton. And I go, yeah. He said, well, I was in your program and you helped me and my mother. And I just started crying. My wife was sitting in the car. I come back. She said, what happened? I said, I just met one of the kids. He didn't give me a break on the meal, though, But it was just, it's those kind of things that keep me going and keep my drive going and doing what we do to help kids.
And that it was that emotional. I mean, you were crying?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I cry a lot when I see him because, I know what I've been through and what these kids have gone through and these families. But, they're resilient. They bounce back. And the key is just having that caring adult on that campus and being there. We help out with attendance. We've given thousands of ponchos out. Believe it or not, kids won't come to school if it's raining. So we've given ponchos, we give coats out during winter. We do everything that we
South Community Blood Centers, providing blood and patient services to the local hospitals, serving patients in this community. Donating blood with Life South helps save lives. More at lifesouth.org to find a blood drive near you.
20 minutes of reading a day paves the way to success. When watching shows together, ask questions and summarize episodes to support comprehension and vocabulary. It's the quality of content that makes a difference. For more information, read jax.org.
I killed Dietrichson. Me, Walter Neff, insurance agent, 35 years old, unmarried, no visible scars.
WJCT Public Media invites you to a special screening of Double Indemnity as we celebrate Noir-vember.
The murder's never perfect. Always comes apart sooner or later.
Wednesday, November 13th, Cash Bar, Piano Jazz, and Film Noir. Doors open at 6:30, film screens at 7. Double Indemnity, November 13th, RSVP at wjct.org/events.
On the next Fresh Air, novelist John le Carré's son, Nick Harkaway, tells us about bringing back his late father's spy master, George Smiley, and Harkaway's new novel. It takes place between le Carré's Cold War spy novels, The Spy Who Came In From the Cold, and Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy. Join us
today at noon on WJCT News 89.9.
How much harm is being done to the nation's healthcare system by private equity firms? The country's largest private for-profit healthcare system declared bankruptcy earlier this year after it emerged that investors and its CEO siphoned off millions of dollars from the business. Lawmakers say these firms prioritize profits over patients, and it needs to stop. We look at that push and the lives being put at risk next time on 1A.
Today, starting at 10 on WJCT News 89.9.
Welcome back. Well, it may not go very far, but this weekend, the Jacksonville Skyway hopes to transport you to a true nightclub experience. Joining me to discuss the Skyway Social is the event's organizer, Nico Costa. Good morning, Nico.
Good morning.
Thanks for being here. Tell us about this. This is a really interesting concept. You are basically taking over the Skyway Saturday.
Yeah. Thank you for that. We're doing the Skyway Social at the JTA Skyway this weekend. So we're taking over 3 of the platforms, Central Station in downtown, Kings Avenue in San Marco, and the San Marco Station. And then we're going to transform those into immersive visual and music experiences.
Yeah. And so this is a ticketed event, but it is open to the public.
Correct. Yeah.
So describe what people are going to experience. I mean, are they riding the Skyway from station to station?
Yeah. So the idea is to transport folks from station to station via the Skyway, getting folks on the train, exposing them to something that, maybe some of most Jacksonvillians have not ridden before.
Yeah. Yeah. And so do you go on a certain route, or are they riding back and forth? Is the train part of the party?
Yeah, so it's a free flow. You'll go from platform to platform at your leisure. The train will be running all night through the event, just going all from end to end, making stops at those 3 platforms. And yeah, you'll get to experience just a different experience at each of the platforms.
What are the different experiences? What are they each going to be themed with?
So Central is going to be transformed to Jungle Junction, so it'll be very floral and greenery.
And Central that's the one at James Weldon Johnson Park?
No, so that's directly across from the Everbank office building.
Okay.
By the ViStar building as well. So that's where one of our entry points will be to the event. So that'll be Jungle Junction, more jungle themed music and things that'll kind of entrance you into the jungle experience. Prism platform will be the San Marco station transformation, so a lot of lights and colors and kind of transforming things through that nature. And then Disco Depot will be our other entry point at
which sort of explains itself.
Yeah.
So how heavy a lift is this? I mean, to get the station, I guess, decked out, lit, with DJ, whatever.
Yeah, it's going to be quite the build. So we've got a pretty condensed timeline. We'll start building out on late Friday night once ridership stops, for the public. And then, through that 24-hour period, or not even through the 12-hour period, we will transform those platforms into, what people will experience this Saturday.
Yeah, and so it's an event. It's music, but there's also there's cocktails, right? It's a
Yep. So food and
regular
beverage
nightclub in a lot of ways.
experiences. So we've got at each platform will be a themed, specialty cocktail that the local restaurant is helping us with, as well as just other non-alcoholic and alcoholic beverages. We'll have a tasting experience at San Marcos Station, the central one as well, along with just some other surprises from themed actors.
So whose idea was this?
So Josue Cruz on our team, as we're talking through, some ideas through the Placemaking Jacks program, had this great idea to transform the Skyway into an event area. So this kind of was born originally through that.
I mean,
that
like a lot of
program.
great ideas that probably sounded just crazy off the top, right?
And those are the best ideas. So we tried to figure out, okay, this is a little crazy, but how can we make this come to life? And thankfully, in partnership with JTA, we've been able to really figure this out. Their team has been a huge supporter of.
How did JTA respond when you approached them with this idea? I'm guessing that was a first for them.
Yeah, definitely a first, and I think for a lot of transit authorities, it's definitely a first. And we wanted to create excitement around what Jacksonville is doing and what our transit authority is capable of hosting, as kind of a representation of how we can use somewhat underutilized areas in the city and get our community engaged with them.
Yeah, so I mean, that's kind of, I guess, one of the goals of placemaking. Is that right? To sort of take a place that's not necessarily a destination and activate it somehow.
Yeah, correct. So we're looking at ways, and through Downtown Vision and the Placemaking Jacks program, we're really just trying to bring people together into these spaces that might not be frequented as much as they should be.
Yeah, and so is this a 21 and up type event?
It is, yeah, 21 and up. We've got two different ticketed options: a GA ticket, so either through Central Station, which will be the entry point, or the Kings Avenue Station, and then we do have a VIP experience that expedites your train entry. Specialty cocktail, preferred parking, and things like that.
Right. And so is there any method to track whether these events, have any long-term impact on the downtown community?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, and something that we're going to look through in our recap surveys, through the data capture that we have, and just really getting feedback from the attendees to see, what their thoughts are about the Skyway. Have these folks that are attending the event, been on the Skyway in the past? So it'll be a good testing ground for us to see what we can do in the future to continue to activate these kind of locations.
All right. Well, it's called the Skyway Social. It's Saturday, October 26th from 6 to 11 p.m. And I guess you can get tickets.
Skyway.social is the website, so tickets are available there.
Excellent. Well, Nico Costa, thanks so much for being here. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me this morning.
All right. That's our program. Thank you so much for listening. We encourage your feedback and suggestions. Please send either to First Coast Connect at WJCT.org. And if you missed anything, you can either catch our rebroadcast at 8 o'clock tonight, or you can find all of our shows, our entire archive, on your favorite podcast platform. The executive producer of First Coast Connect is David Luckin. Our show is produced by Stacey Bennett, directed by Brady Coram, and Jamie Valet is our associate producer. Our theme music is performed by Club de Belugas. On tomorrow's program, is it possible this election season to ditch labels and partisan identities? We'll ask a group of local college students trying to do exactly that. I'm Ann Schindler. You've been listening to First Coast Connect on WJCT News 89.9.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided by Baptist Health and the North Florida TPO.
North Florida TPO, proud sponsor of WJCT's First Coast Connect, bringing to the community innovation in transportation planning, commuter services, clean fuels, and intelligent transportation systems. More at northfloridatpo.com.
Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjacks.com. Elder Source's T-Care program can help caregivers avoid burnout. Caregivers that assist Northeast Florida residents aged 60 or older may be eligible to get resources for themselves at no cost. More information at myeldersource.org.
This is WJCT News 89.9 Jacksonville. Up next, national and local news from NPR and the WJCT News team.
Few places are as important as your local hospital. Only nowadays, the care it provides may depend on the way it's financed. From WAMU and NPR in Washington, this is 1A.